Today, we're joined by Advanced Handling Systems to discuss the strategy around micro-fulfillment and how to best qualify and implement a micro-fulfillment system in underutilized retail space. We're going to take a deep dive into the challenges a micro-fulfillment system solves and strategic steps to consider when finding the right solution for your space. Our presenters today have a combined 50+ years of experience in the supply chain industry. So right now, let's welcome our presenters. Up first, we have Dave Tavel, the Chief Research and Development Engineer. Dave is a supply chain professional specializing in process design. He has over 40 years of experience in the evaluation, design, management, and sales of sophisticated distribution solutions. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dave.
Thanks for having us. Glad to be here.
Up next, we have Zach Bain, Director of Innovative Systems. Zach has over 15 years focusing on outside-the-box automated solutions in a multitude of industries. He focused on driving innovative strategies into the supply chain industry, particularly robotics and goods-to-person technology. So glad you could join us too, Zach.
Thanks for having us. We look forward to presenting to you.
And lastly, we also have Jordan Frank joining us. He's the Director of Automated Systems and brings over 10 years of experience, focusing on both traditional and emerging technologies. He specializes in turning the conceptual into reality by evaluating all technologies to understand and recommend what works best for your solution. We appreciate your time with us today as well, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks. Excited to be here.
So to begin, why don't we start off with you, Dave?
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate your time and attention today. We have a timely topic to discuss around micro-fulfillment. Certainly, we know the driver for micro-fulfillment is e-commerce, but the nitrous oxide that's really pushing this forward has been the pandemic. And so what we'd like to do in this presentation today is define micro-fulfillment as we see it, talk a little bit about the various strategies that are available in the market. And then I'm going to turn it over to Zach and Jordan to provide information on really how to take these strategies forward into an implementation phase. So let's start with defining micro-fulfillment. So what is it? Micro-fulfillment is really a reaction to the need for retailers and brands to provide a SLA, timely delivery, accurate delivery of products to the customers. So it really refers to the idea of placing small-scale warehouses in locations, right? Urban locations close to the end consumer who makes purchases. The strategy is speed and localized in-store pickup and the ability to do that using the efficiencies that we've all learned through large-scale implemented automation in warehouses. We like to say it's traditional distribution centers meet vending machines. So what challenges does it solve? The basic applications that we focus on are in-store, dark store, and online centers. So in-store strategies involve the reclamation of perhaps some retail space, but more often the back rooms of stores where we can drive automation and efficiency for the highest moving SKUs within a given area. Dark stores are basically facilities that are self-contained, fully automated centers that are regionally located, that are truly employee-based, that provide really customer pickup and curbside activities, along with last mile deliveries. And then online centers really are smaller facilities that are typically standalone, right? They're in larger metropolitan areas, and the sole purpose is facilitating shipping of online orders for that specific region. So as we look at these locations, there are also unconventional opportunities to consider. We're seeing trends where people are using central car parks stock rooms of local shops, the basements of office buildings. One of those strategies is repurposing existing space. So as underperforming stores are being reutilized, it's possible that the retail strategies for the retailers and the brands, they may own their own real estate, or they may be in extended leases, but the stores are underperforming. Well, this is a really great opportunity with micro-fulfillment to reclaim those stores, utilize that space, and then perhaps use goods-to-person technology like robotics to basically do goods-to-person delivery for order processing. But it also provides the opportunity to do sequence loading for last-mile delivery. Inventory is another strategy that allows micro-fulfillment to shine. It allows retailers to control their inventory where it's needed. So part of the strategy that we'll talk about later in the presentation has to do with what is the inventory that consumers need. So are we putting A moving SKUs only, A, Bs, leaving Cs and Ds for the larger facility to fulfill? And so we'll speak to that a little later in the presentation. Reduction of labor. You know, the rendering that's depicted here in this slide shows a new trend of, it's really the combination of the way, you know, perhaps people want to shop. Automation and technology, when you consider the different characteristics of what's housed in a store, frozen, chilled, your produce, your butcher area. Most people want to go in and perhaps hand select that. But the normal products, your box of Cheerios, so on and so forth, can be automated. So what this depiction really shows is a way to enhance the consumer's opportunity through shopping, but by automating the back ends, it's providing the retailer the opportunity to reduce labor through, you know, no restockers, so to speak. And it just creates a better customer experience. So this too is another strategy for consideration. So with that, what we'd like to do is spend the next part of this presentation is really talking about how to intelligently implement these strategies, what types of technologies fit the bill, and try to help you all navigate the landmines of coming up with the right designs and timely getting them to market. Zach, Jordan?
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. So this is a very powerful slide, and we'll talk to a lot of different points as we go through this slide. But really, it's what are the strategies to consider and the steps to consider. And so as you evaluate your need for micro-fulfillment, how do you go about starting? Step 1, step 2, step 3. So it really boils down into who are your target customers? Who are you going to go after, and who are you trying to attract to fulfill to out of these micro-fulfillment centers? What kind of innovation and automation strategy are you going to be considering to look at? And then ultimately, how are you going to support the strategy? How are you going to make sure that it's continuing to get the SLAs that you're looking for? How are you making sure that it is essentially doing everything that you're looking to do for your customer, as well as to fulfill your strategy? So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. And so in order for it to be successful, you really need to come up with a long-term strategy for that. There's really difficulties with scarce resources right now in organizations, and there's the steps for that strategy really boil down into starting with step 1. So step 1 is, who are your target customers? Who are you looking to fulfill to? What are those needs of those customers? What are your regional targets? Are they local? Are they more regional based? Are they more multiple state based? How are you going to reach those target customers? How quickly do you need to be able to respond? How quickly do you need to fulfill the order? Some opportunities we're looking at are within an hour. Some opportunities are within the same day or the next day. So you really have to understand what your SLAs, how quickly do you need to fulfill that order to the customer in order to make sure that you fully understand your strategy. Next is, what kind of flexibility do you need? Do you need to be able to scale? Do you need to be able to scale the technology or the solution? Or is your strategy to put a micro-fulfillment center in and grow out of that facility, which is one of the technologies or one of the strategies, excuse me, that our customers are employing today is let's start with one. As we grow out of that facility, we may add more facilities. So really understanding what kind of flexibility do you need, tying into those SKUs, how quickly you're going to respond to the customer, and how are you going to scale those? Because ultimately what we've seen with the latest impacts of COVID and the pandemic and just the customer driving is essentially you need to be able to scale and scale quickly in order to fulfill what your customer needs are. So when you map the flexibility and scalability of your needs, one of the main points that you need to consider very heavily is what type of SKUs are you going to put in the facility, and what type of SKUs are you going to put in the technology that you may consider. So when you look at that, you really have to understand the values of your SKUs, the velocities of your SKUs, the days of active on hand. As an example, if I have an A mover and it's in almost every single order, it may not make sense to put it in the technology that I utilize, but set that up in an area in which I could go grab that SKU and put it into every single order. So as you evaluate that technology, it may make more sense just to set a pallet of that product and be able to pull that specific SKU. But really, once you sit down and understand the cubic space of the SKU and what you need for the days of active, then you could sit down and really make some good decisions on what makes sense to put where and what SKUs that you have within the facility to fulfill. So one other last quick thing would be maybe you have a couple of D movers. That may not make sense to put inside even the micro-fulfillment center, as in maybe it's only 1 out of every 1,000 orders that you may fulfill that to. So you really need to look through the space that you have allotted, the technologies that you're considering, and the SKUs that you're going to offer to those end customers and to those target customers in order to understand how you go about mapping your flexibility and ensuring that you have the scalability of your process and your solution. So Jordan, as we start going through that process, one of the things that you start looking at and how you help evaluate those types of technologies and integrators to utilize for that strategy, why don't you go ahead and take over and tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Zach. So like Zach mentioned earlier regarding evaluating SKUs, understanding which SKUs can fit into your profile, you also need to evaluate the technology that you want to use. There are a variety of different technologies out in the industry today that many of you are probably aware of, and those can include goods to person, persons to goods, shelf levels, AMRs, which is autonomous mobile robots, and a variety of others. One of the things to consider is some of the constraints you have in your facility and some of the SKUs you're trying to slot. As an example, shuttles or mini loads, which is a type of goods to person technology, really requires a high vertical clearance. If you don't have a high vertical clearance in your facility, it may not be a great fit. And to help, when I say a high vertical clearance, we're usually thinking 30 feet or above. So really understand what could fit into your facility existing today. Something else to think about, like Zach mentioned earlier, was the flexibility and scalability. Do you want to have the ability to add storage, but not necessarily add throughput? Do you want to add throughput, but not necessarily add storage? There are technologies that fit that bill. A lot of those types of technologies are a goods to person type technology. And one last thing to consider is it doesn't have to be one technology solves it all. You can have a variety of different technologies that you can integrate into the same facility to really maximize each process, to reduce as much labor as you can, or to create a more efficient process. So if I had to leave you with something, it is simply understand your constraints of your facility and understand that not one technology needs to solve everything. Really look and understand how each individual technology can solve a different process within your facility. And the other thing that we really believe in and that you have to make sure is right is make sure your cultures align. Culture is a very important element in any strategic or automated journey because there are going to be bumps in the road and we are growing together. And like Zach said earlier, this is on the leading edge and it is innovative and it is exciting and it does work well. And it helps solve a lot of the problems we face today, including reducing labor and faster pickup times, faster service times, better SLAs, whatever works for your business. So once you understand what your capabilities are, what you need in a partner, it's now time to pick the right partner. So as a last piece of advice, make sure the cultures align, make sure you truly understand what the skill sets of that partner is, and make that selection. What works best for you? So with that, there's also the strategy around how we can support. So Zach, I'm going to turn it back over to you and let you talk through the different levels of support and the support strategy in general that we offer.
Sounds good. So Jordan hit the nail on the head. As you sit down and evaluate those and you make some decisions, you really have to understand as you deploy that technology, as you deploy the really your strategy to target those customers, how are you going to support the technology? So what type of level of support? There's multiple companies that are out there that would do support levels where the integrator does all of the support. Really, essentially, the customer is just providing the labor in order to execute or do the actual processing, right, with the technology. Other customers are more willing to take on some of the level of support. So you really have to understand what type of technology did you deploy? Do you want to build up your team in order to do the preventative maintenance, to do all the different types of upkeep to keep the technology working, and as well as fulfilling your customers' goals? Or do you go more of a localized support? Are you willing to wait 4 to 6 hours for a potential support person to be on site in case you get to that certain type of level? So you really have to understand what is your strategy of that. How long is an acceptable risk of time to basically need somebody to help you get the system back up and running? And that really boils down to is if you're trying to do every hour fulfillment or last mile or those types of things with your micro-fulfillment strategy, uptime is extremely important. And so you really need to build those resources out to make sure that you can fulfill that. And then what's your future strategy? As I mentioned before, and Jordan kind of hit on, is maybe you have a multi-phase approach. Maybe you have multiple regional micro-fulfillment centers within a metropolitan area in order to basically achieve your goal. So maybe there's different strategies. Some of the strategies we've seen some customers take is the first couple of years, they rely on the integrator in order to provide that support. And then that eventually transitions over to the end customer as they get more familiar with the technology, as they understand the ins and outs and be able to watch those types of developments happen for the support. And then ultimately ensure that the integrator is aligned to what you need. Do not go into an opportunity in a contract with your integrator without understanding what level of support will you get from the integrator, what level of support will you get from the technology that you deploy, and make sure that it aligns culturally with your company, as Jordan outlined, and making sure that that hits the ultimate goals that you're trying to achieve. So just kind of going back through those 3 different categories, who are you going to target with the customer, and what are the ultimate goals of that, and what do you want to achieve with that? What types of innovation and automation strategies are you going to deploy? Are there multiple phases? What is your phased approach for if you grow out of that facility? Because as Dave outlined, micro-fulfillment centers are not large fulfillment centers. So if your business grows, what are you going to do next? And then ultimately boils down to how are you going to continue to get everything that you need to get out of the micro-fulfillment center as you move forward with the company and as you move forward with your strategy and your growth strategies. So ultimately hitting all 3 of those are extremely important in your strategies, steps to consider for your micro-fulfillment strategy.
Thank you so much to Dave, Zach, and Jordan for walking us through this presentation and educating us on how best to qualify and implement a micro-fulfillment system in these spaces. Right now, we're going to open the floor for participants. So if you have any questions for our presenters, then please feel free to submit them right now into the chat.